Well, I wanted to shoot this live, but I guess not. But I came down here to share a story about Ed. Ed is a homeless man that I've been helping on the weekends. And he's been homeless for 35 years. And almost 3 weeks ago, and it's took me 2.5 weeks to find him because nobody knew where he really was. But I found him. And every time I'd see him, every weekend when I would see him, I'd made a little special bag for him with extra stuff in it, like jars of peanut butter and extra things that he liked. And so I went to see him today in the hospital, and when I walked through the door, he knew exactly who I was and had a big old smile on his face. And I walked up to him, and half of his head is gone. And he told me, he said, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And I said, what are you sorry for, sweetie? He says, I'm sorry I didn't listen to you about my drinking. He said, every time you came out, you talked to me about Jesus, and you talked to me about drinking and sin and stuff. And he said, I'm so sorry I didn't listen to you. He says, because that's why I'm here. You see, he got so drunk that he kept falling, and he kept falling and hitting his head on the concrete. And then someone took advantage of him too, because they saw him in his state. But it crushed his head so bad that it almost killed him, and he almost died. And half of his head is gone now. They had to take half of his skull out. And he's on life support now. Oxygen machine, feeding tube, and the whole 9 yards. And he told me, he said, Miss Tammy, he said, please forgive me. And I said, sweetie, I'm not mad at you. Ask God to forgive you. And he did. And he said, would you have everybody pray that God take me home? And I said, heaven home? And he said, yes. He says, I don't want to be in this world anymore. He doesn't want to have to go back out on the streets. He's been on the streets for 35 years, y'all. And he wants to go home to where he's not suffering anymore, and he's not in pain anymore, and he's not hungry anymore, and he's not going through all the things that he's had to go through the last 35 years on the streets. So y'all pray for him. He wants to go home and be with Jesus. But he told me to share with y'all his story. You see, he allowed the enemy to take over. And so he got so drunk that he didn't know what he was doing. He was out of control, and he kept falling and falling and falling and hitting his head and hitting his head and hitting his head and hitting his head and hitting his head. You see, sin, all kinds of sin, whether it's alcohol or drugs or sex, all the things that the Bible tells us are sin, it leads to death. Thank God this man is still alive, and I got to go see him in the hospital, and he asked God to forgive him, and he asked God to help him to forgive others. So it's up to God whether he goes home or not. But he's right with the Lord now. So if the Lord takes him home, he's right and he's ready. Don't let sin become death in your life or even cause you death. That's my point, and that's my message. Y'all keep this man in prayer. There's nothing in this world worth losing your soul. There's nothing in this world fun enough or exciting enough or whatever enough to take the place of your soul being right before the Lord. Don't let anything stand in the way. I love you guys, and I just wanted to share. God bless you.